Hey everybody, Steve Burns here. So we're going to get into building our 3D objects now. So in this video, I want to really talk about using 2D information or 2D shapes to create our 3D objects. We're also going to focus on vector information altered into 3D objects. And we're going to get into some of the aspects of a 3D object once we create it in Photoshop, which is your extrusions, your bevels, and your inflations. Okay? All right. Now, 3D environment, nothing more and nothing less than vector information. Now, that environment can also utilize raster-based information, which we're going to use for texturing later on. So I'm going to come over here to my menu, go to my vector object here. And if you can see here, I simply have a little gradient in the background and a simple layer right on top. Just a standard transparent layer. So I'm going to pull this back a little bit. I'm working in a square, a 5 by 5 inch square at 200 ppi. I'm going to come over here and grab the rounded rectangle tool. And I'm just going to make a little shape like so. Okay. All right. So by default, I have white as a fill. That's fine. I have my corners here. What I like about this rounded rectangles, in the properties panel, I can actually alter the curves or the nature of the curves here, make it more wider or thinner. So if I click and hold on this, I can adjust my curves accordingly. So I'm going to take it somewhere about there. Now this is just to get an initial shape. So from this shape, we're going to create our 3D object. So I'm going to come over here to my 3D panel. And before we played around with the mesh from preset, this time we're going to create an extrusion. So I'm going to target the 3D extrusion. Once targeted, I'm going to hit create. Now we're going to sit back and relax. And Photoshop has created a 3D environment, a 3D object within a 3D environment. All right, so I'm going to go to my rotation tool, target my camera, so I can rotate this around a little bit. Now, once again, my entire interface becomes one big 3D environment, okay? And if we go to our layers and take a look at the little symbol in the bottom right-hand corner, we have a 3D cube there. So that tells us that we're working in a 3D environment. I'm going to hit Command or Control 0 to pop it to full view very quickly. So let's go understand the nature of this 3D object. So if I turn it around, I can see my numbers here. And this is a new in the latest updates in Photoshop. Having these numbers down here is great. So it's the dimensions of your object in relationship to your 3D printer. All extrusions that you create from a 2D layer is going to have several aspects to it. And also keep in mind, and we're going to actually share that, I'm going to share this with you later on, that you can also extrude from painted shapes on your layers. So I'll share that with you in a little bit. The reason we went to vector is because 3D environment is a vector environment. So I wanted to create a 2D object that speaks fluently with the same environment that your 3D engine is in. Now, if I use my Alt and spacebar to zoom in and out, you see how things become pixelated here? Because what we're doing is we're interpolating the image. Your video card is interpolating the image by zooming in. Now, if you want a smooth edge to get the best, smoothest detail to see in your 3D object, go to your 3D panel here with the camera targeted. Go to the slide tool and just slide it in, okay? Slide it in and look at that. We get no pixelization. So what Photoshop is doing now is it's rendering the 3D objects, or I wouldn't say rendering, it's not really the proper word, because we're not using the render command, but what we're doing is we're using OpenGL to reinterpret this edge. Okay, so if I go over here to the rotation tool, I can move it around and I can see the detail on the edges. So I want to kind of push this back just a little bit more. I'm gonna hit the V key on my keyboard to toggle over to my slide tool, and I'm gonna pull this on back. All right, so that's close enough right there. That should work. So let's go take a look at the various aspects of my 3D object. Now right over here, I have a rounded rectangle. Now I can rename this. So I'm basically clicking on the 3D object. I can hit the eyeball here to turn it on or off. Okay, there it is. There it is. It's off. And if I hit the eyeball again, I can turn it on. Now, I'm going to pull this back a little bit because I want to show you this next technique and how we can modify the extrusion. Once the 3D object is targeted, right down here in the property panels are your properties or your options for any of these 3D attributes. The camera, it will change. The infinite light, it will change to its properties. The environment, it will change to something different. Okay, we're going to an environment lighting. If I target the 3D object, now we're going to get the aspects for that 3D object. I want to name this 3D object. I'm going to just double click it. Okay, and how about if I rename this one rectangle 1. Okay, and hit enter so that you're aware that you can rename any of these. Now, with the 3D object targeted, go to our properties here, and what we can see is presets for your shapes. We're going to get into this later. The ability to catch shadows from other 3D shapes is checked. Cast shadows onto your ground plane or other 3D shapes are checked. Okay, so that's going to be very handy. And if we target invisible, that will make your object completely invisible. All right, I'm going to turn that off. Turn that back off so we can see the 3D object. Now, right down at the bottom here, we have the ability to extend our extrusion. Because remember what we did was we created an extrusion. So if I take the slider to the right, it pulls it further out. If I go to the opposite direction, it goes into the negative Z direction. Positive Z direction, negative Z direction. Okay, so there's our extrusion. I'm going to pull it out just a little bit more. And I'm going to go over here to the camera and hit my rotation command. I want to pull it just a little bit right here so we can see what's going to happen in the next step. Target our 3D object once again. Now, this is some basic modifications that you have in this panel. And this panel is controlled by these 4 buttons here on the very top left-hand corner. So if I target the next button over, now I have more capabilities. Not only do I have extrusion depth, right? I also have other capabilities such as twist, all right? So I can twist in either direction, positive or negative direction, okay? And it's very, very fast. I'm just moving this real quick using my mouse and bringing it across. Now I can reset it back to 0 by typing 0 in there, hitting return, and it resets. Now we have taper, which 100% is your base. So what it's going to do is it's going to taper the area that's extruding away from your front area of your shape. So I'm going to make it larger or smaller. Okay, so this should give you some ideas that maybe you can make some interesting text effects with it zooming in the back or from the back, giving that appearance. All right, so I'm going to hit 100% and reset that one. Now I'm going to scroll down here some more, and at the bottom we have a couple options. Bend and shear. Now this is fun. Let's go bend on the x-axis. Look at that, it just bends all the way around. I'm going to pull this over just a little bit. There we are. And we can see, get a better view of what this is doing on the other side. So bending it there, you can see it's going way outside the document bounds there, okay? Because we're working in a complete 3D environment with the document just being the area that we're going to actually render. So I can go in either direction really fast, really fun stuff. Okay, I'm gonna hit 0, and I can also scale or bend on the vertical axis in either direction. So I'm gonna go ahead and reset that back to 0. Now I'm gonna go to shear. All right, now what shear is going to do is you can see it's going to shear that back end away from the front end. and I can do it in either axis, the x-axis, and I'm going to hit 0 and reset that one, or the y-axis going up and down. So you have those simple capabilities of modifying your shapes. Let's hit 0 and go back. Now, let's take up the extrusion, and I like working in this panel with the second icon selected here because I have several options, including the extrusion. I'm going to pull the extrusion back a little bit, tighten it up. Okay, Command 0 to just pop this into the full frame very quickly. Let's get in closer. So with the camera targeted, go to my slide tool. We're going to move this on like so. All right. Let's go to my rotation, and let's rotate this just a bit so we can see our next technique. Let's pull it down like so. I think that works there. All right, so targeting my 3D object once again, we're going to go to another aspect of your 3D object, which is going to be your bevel, okay, and also your inflation. So I'm going to go over to the third option here, target it, and you have your bevel options, and then right down the bottom you have your inflation options. Let's start with bevel. So if I target the bevel and adjust the width, and you can see my lighting is kind of difficult to see in the front because of the direction of my lighting. If that happens, target your light. You can see it straight onto the face. It's hard to see the edges, and just flip it around. Okay, I think that's going to work. Now we could, there we go. That's good. So I'm going to go target the object once again. Go over to my bevel options, and there's my width. I can adjust that. I can go to my angle, put my mouse over the word angle, and just drag back and forth as well. And if I pull this here, go to the width, pull it down, pull it out, and just playing with these two, okay, will give you a different type of a bevel. Now, right now, my bevel is a fairly flat edge. I can change that right over here for the contour. And the contour is just using a vector shape. It's basically using your curves tool to reshape your edges. So if I click on this, I can actually adjust that curve like so, all right? And then if I click OK, you can see it's actually reshaping that bevel. Really fun stuff. Now, if I go back and shape it in a different way, I can put a point there, pull it down, and put another point to pull it up. Let's see what we get from this. I'll just smooth this out like so and reshape it. Let's see what we get here. So we click OK, and look at that. All right. So play around with those features, and in your 3D program right over here in the bevel. It's gonna be nice. Now, what about the front inflation? Let me go over here to the width. Let's pull that down a little bit. And let's go to our camera, and I'm going to rotate it just a little bit like so. Now, the front inflation is like, your inflation is the actual shape that you extruded from. So this is your inflation, this is your extrusion, and of course, again, this is our bevel. Now, if we go over to our inflation, right over here, under the inflate, I'm going to pull it on down. I have an inflate angle. But we got to give it some strength, right? We have to tell it to actually blow up like a balloon. So pull the strength. There we go. That's the strength. Now I can adjust the angle further out, deeper in, where it's actually going back into the space. And pull this out like so. I'm going to adjust my lighting a little bit so you can see this better. So target my light source again. And you're going to find that you're going to constantly have to adjust your lighting on a regular basis to see the effects of your surface attributes. Let's see what happens now. Go to the inflation, third icon over, and adjust. See, well, that's not even, let's go, there we go. We can go in, now it's going in and out. We can see a little bit better there. All right, so there you are. There's your inflation, okay? So I'm going to just reset all this. Back to 0, okay, and it's going to flatten out that surface. So you've just, you have an experience now of what can be done in terms of creating custom 3D objects. And that really is the basics of it. It's an extrusion. All your 3D objects, custom objects, is going to be made from an extrusion. Now, it seems like it's simplified, but I'm going to actually create something. We're going to actually go create a glass object, so like a wine glass or a wine bottle, and show you how to view your shapes so that you can extrude a lot of different 3D objects from simple patterns. Okay, so all we're doing is we're using a basic shape, and then we're going to extrude it out, and then we're going to go get into various properties, and especially the shape presets on how to help us create the shapes that we need.